Hello, we are delighted to be joined by Tony Vickers-Byrne, a member of the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work, also a trustee at the Royal Society for Public Health in England, and former chief advisor for HR practice at CIPD. But I'll pass over to you, Tony, to elucidate a little bit for the benefit of everyone at home.
Yeah, thanks for that, and yeah, thanks for tuning into this. It's I think we have to make sure that we're communicating in whichever way we can, and I think that lots of these video conferences are proving effective, so hopefully you'll get something out of this. So yeah, I've done quite a lot of work over the last couple of years in particular about the importance of compassionate leadership and diversity and inclusion and well-being being right at the forefront of employers' responsibilities. It's been great that the CIPD have really put well-being and diversity again right at the forefront of what they're asking their 150,000 plus members to be doing. And my goodness me, never been a more important time for us to concentrate on supporting and looking after our people. So yeah, delighted to be here today, Grace. Thank you. Super.
And so to begin, compassionate leadership and management has been the focus of your work for some time, and of course there is an increasing conversation around it at the moment. But could you give us an example of what that means and what it might look like?
Yeah, I think the example that's being used all around the world at the moment, and I hope we don't set her up to then, reduce her, as we often do in the press, and that we build up our heroes and then we take them down, is Jacinda Ardern. Mm-hmm. I remember a year ago at a conference, young people working in HR were talking about her as being the role model after the Christchurch massacre, and the way that she'd responded to that and the way that she'd reached out to all of her population, including her Muslim population, to look after and support them. She got worldwide acclaim for that. And then, a few months later, there was a volcanic eruption. And again, she dealt well with that and was clearly empathetic and supported the people there. And now the pandemic, and I think New Zealand is held up as one of the best examples in the world of how to deal with the pandemic. And she's never lost sight, I think, of the fact that she's had compassion at the forefront of this. And compassion isn't about being soft, it's about making tough decisions quickly, communicating them, and really understanding the impact that those are going to have on people and putting the support mechanisms in place to do that. And I think she's done a remarkable job. And I think that the circumstances are terrible, but I think it shows that compassionate leadership can really be the most effective leadership. And, looking back to my career today, so Gareth Goodyear, who I had the privilege of working with when he was chief executive at the Royal Brompton and Harefield hospitals. And Gareth was going through some tragic issues in his own personal life, but never lost sight of looking after his team, looking after the hospital, supporting people. And I know that when he went over to Addenbrooke's, Cambridge, a few years later, he was voted by his peers, the other chief executives in the NHS, as being the outstanding chief executive. And that wasn't just because he was a doctor or he was managing a huge, enormous, important worldwide hospital. I think it was also because he was a decent human being. He's caring, he's kind, and he's compassionate. And he puts other people first. And that's what people want in a leader, particularly at these times.
Okay, super. Thank you, Tony. And so working lives have obviously, there's been a huge shift in what they look like in the last couple of weeks, but increasingly also there is discussion about the fact that it won't be a return to business as usual, or at least as we've known it, and that there will be a new normal emerging. And so in the context of that, have you got an outline for what the key considerations should be for employers during that phase and during that change?
It's got to be the health and safety of their staff. I mean, that we talk now about well-being. Health and safety perhaps sounds a bit like an old-fashioned sort of term, but it's never been more important. The trade unions at the moment are rightfully asking for effective risk assessments to be carried out for people before they return to work. And I think it's going to be easier to do that in an office environment, where spacing can be done, staggered hours, flexible working. An increasing number of people now are saying that they want flexible working. Was really, really important that employers look after staff on building sites, out in the community, obviously on frontline services. And that's where it's really, really difficult to get social distancing. And the message, I think, is that employers have got to sit down with their staff and understand the implications for every single person in the workforce as to make them feel safe. And it may take more for some people than others. I know that some people with autism are going to be finding this really quite tough about the idea of going back into an open plan office and not having that protected space. So the message is, I think, that employers, line managers have got to actually have those individual conversations with people to reassure them about how they can come back and be safe at work. And the mental health considerations are going to be enormous. I think only this morning on the television I was looking at big initiatives being raised in local hospitals in London, to support the well-being of healthcare workers. The fact that many of them will have suffered post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, as a result of what's been happening over the past few weeks. And we need to ensure that well-being is seen as right at the top of a line manager's responsibility. Peter Cheese, who's the chief executive of CIPD, and it's great to work with Peter for the last 18 months of my sort of full-time employment before I retired recently. Peter, I remember when I first met him, was talking about his vision for what HR should do for organisations. And he was talking about that every organisation should give paid time off to do charitable work in their local communities. He was talking about every post having the potential to work flexibly. That may be in terms of hours, it may be in terms of location, it may be in terms of duties, and also that every employee feels that their manager gives a damn about them. And when you think about those three issues now, I think that's what employees want. They want to feel that they can support their families and their local communities when necessary. They want to have that power to be able to work as flexibly as possible. And they want to know that their manager's got their back and, gives a damn about them and is going to look after them and support them. Everybody's in this together. And I think one of Jacinda's terms that I love is she talks about, the team of 5 million, the population of New Zealand, that everybody's in it together. And the way that she communicates, after she's just put her child to bed and, dressed informally and just talking about what it's like to be in lockdown along with the other 5 million people in New Zealand. And so I think employees want employers to just be human, to show their vulnerability and to actually understand the vulnerabilities of everybody who they're supposed to be looking after.
Super stuff. Thank you, Johnny. And with regard to the work that you've done with the National Forum for Health and Wellbeing at Work, compassionate management and, of course, wellbeing have been integral to that. And so based on your work there, what kind of advice would you offer employers and managers currently and going forward?
I think to use the compassion word, I think some members of the National Forum, when we developed a compassion at work toolkit, they were a little bit nervous. This was a couple of years ago about using compassion as a word. Should we not use fairness? And we said, no, go on, use the word. And it's a powerful word. It's a word rooted in our sort of consciousness, in our soul, I think. And that when people have gone back and started talking about compassion, about being action, about taking intelligent action to address people's concerns and support them, then all the feedback I've had from members of the National Forum has been really positive. And, that these are 40 medical and HR directors from some of the biggest organisations in the country, places like Shell, Barclays, Twitter, Microsoft, Tesco, John Lewis, Cabinet Office, NHS employers, etc., etc., one thing which I remember, which really sticks out, Andy Rhodes, who's the Chief Constable for Lancashire Constabulary, and he's the wellbeing lead for the whole of the police force. And they've used the Compassionate Work Toolkit as an integral part of their leadership development and management development. And, you know, Andy talked about, you know, what his vision is of the way that police officers deal with members of the public. And, you know, he wants a police officer at the end of their tough week's shift, you know, where they may have seen really heartbreaking things and traumatic things during the course of that week. He wants that police officer to be able to be as compassionate on a Friday afternoon, say, as they were on a Monday morning, because the distress the individual is suffering, that the police officer is supporting, you know, is just as much on a Friday as if it had happened on a Monday. I think it's a real powerful description that, you know, people need to do this. They shouldn't be somehow feel it weakens them. You know, Jacinta again always talks about the strength of kindness, strength of being compassionate, and I think that business now must see this. You know, every time you turn on the radio, every time you turn on the TV, you're hearing examples about what it means to support people. You know, the heroes and villains of business, as they're described in some of the press. You know, I don't think we're ever going to go back to what it was before. And there was a Edelman Trust Barometer published literally in the last couple of days, which talked about governments across the world now having gained in terms of trust. It was a survey of 11 countries, places like Germany, USA, UK, France, Japan, India, talking about the trust that people have in governments, and it's gone up by 11 points to 65%. It's now more than the trust in employers, and that's never been the case before in the 20 years of the Edelman Trust Barometer. You know, organisations, chief executives have always been trusted more than governments, and at the moment, from that survey, it shows that governments across the world generally do have the confidence of their populations, and it's now chief executives who are being asked to step up to the plate to actually ensure that they look after their people and that the return to work is gradual and doesn't put people at risk. So fascinating what the pandemic has done to those levels of trust, and, you know, it's now for big organisations in particular to act as role models for smaller organisations and to look after their supply chains, look after their customers, look after the people in their communities, which is what people want.
Super. Fascinating stuff. And I suppose to build on what you were mentioning about the changes that are being undertaken and the question of what will the future look like, what kinds of changes do you anticipate to working life and to the relationship between employers and employees?
I think that employers will have been through this. They will have lost people. They will have lost loved ones. They will have had scares and risks. They will have been reminded what it's like to be human and to be vulnerable. You know, again, listening to my favourite Radio 5 Live, you know, the numbers of celebrities and sort of senior people who've come on and said, here's a chance now to readdress my work-life balance, to actually become much more focused on the people around me and the people who need me and the people who I love. And that's not meaning that they're going to sort of negate their responsibilities to their colleagues, but it's about putting people at the centre of business going forward. CIPD has been talking about this for the past 2 or 3 years under Peter's leadership, and now I think it's got a huge opportunity to support line managers who perhaps have never been expected to operate like this going forward, to where, you know, money has driven decisions rather than the well-being of people. And here's an opportunity now for HR to be absolutely at the forefront of making that cultural change, which the country and the world is crying out for, and just making sure that we've got that necessary infrastructure of support and care and safety for all of our staff. You know, when I was doing my presentations, the last presentation I did actually was on the 18th of March. It was like this, it was a video conference. But I was talking to colleagues from Engage for Success, social movement about staff engagement. And I kind of talked about my usual sort of admiration for a guy called Robert Kennedy. And it was actually it was the 52nd anniversary of a speech he made at Canberra State University. It was during the democratic election process in 1968. And it's really quite poignant because Kennedy was assassinated a few months afterwards, beginning of June 1968. And I remember the trauma, of course, in our household in Manchester. My mother had pictures of Robert Kennedy and JFK on the wall. And I remember her just sobbing when she heard that Robert had been shot. And I've always had that interest in him and just looked at what he was standing for as a leader. And I think Jacinda's taking on his legacy. And I dug out this speech that he did at Kansas University on the 18th of March. And I'll read it now. I won't do it justice in the way that he would have done it. But it speaks so much, I think, to what it means to be a leader in this new world.
Thank you.
So Kennedy talked about our gross national product now is over $800 billion. That gross national product, if we judge the United States of America by that, counts air pollution and cigarette advertising and ambulances to clear our highways of carnage. It counts the destruction of the redwood and the loss of our natural wonder in chaotic sprawl. It counts napalm, nuclear warheads, and armoured cars to fight the riots in our cities. It counts the television programmes which glorify violence in order to sell toys to our children. Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play. It does not include the beauty of our poetry, or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate, or the integrity of our public officials. It measures neither our wisdom nor our learning, neither our compassion nor our devotion to our country. It measures everything, in short, except that which makes life worthwhile, when it can tell us everything about America except why we are proud that we are Americans. And Jacinda in New Zealand is wanting well-being and mental health support as a fundamental part of the gross domestic product for the country. Kennedy there talks about it, and had he become president in 1968, perhaps the US would be a world leader in this. Bhutan has developed this, and it tends to be countries that are quite spiritual and where put this as a fundamental part of their values. But I think it's the direction to come. I'm delighted to have got to a stage in my career where I can now sort of take it a little bit easier, knowing that these principles are going to be a fundamental part of business going forward. I think CIPD is doing a really good job in making the HR function realise just the importance of this. And while we've got people like Jacinda in the world, then it means that we're going to be led well, and these are going to become part and parcel of business as usual.
Super stuff. Plenty of food for thought there, Tony. Pleasure to speak with you as ever. Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Take care.